Well, to start off today, would you be willing to provide a little bit of context to our listeners about what is Trans Awareness Week and Trans Day of Remembrance, and sort of what is the importance to the LGBTQ plus community as a whole, but also to the trans community?
I see Trans Awareness Week as a week of celebration and visibility. I see it as a week where the trans community can show their pride and feel validated, which I think is extra important, particularly with the results of the recent election and some of the transphobic provisions in Project 2025, which if you haven't read up on, you really should. And also particularly in light of the transphobic legislation that has been proposed and or passed in many states in the last couple of years. I think it's a particularly difficult time to be a trans young person. On the one hand, I'm always in awe of how brave people are these days to come out as trans early. It's a beautiful thing. One of my best friends in California, her daughter had a close friend who came out at 4 as a trans girl. And, fortunately, that child lived in a supportive community and she got to live, pretty much her entire childhood in her gender, which is really great. And there are a number of other people who come out very early. And I feel like they're so brave. It's a beautiful thing when that happens. However, it's been a very difficult time recently for people who are out. And I think particularly for young people who are out, seeing this wave of transphobia come back in the United States. And so I think anything that we can do to validate people's identity and celebrate it and give people courage and strength to keep going and to fight against the forces of transphobia is really important. And that's one thing we can do with the whole week. I think also that we can spread awareness to people who maybe are cis straight people who probably do know trans people in their lives, but maybe they don't know that they know trans people in their lives. I think anything we can do to spread knowledge of trans history to people is helpful. Sometimes it can help people realize that this is not some kind of recent phenomenon. Like the fact that maybe people are able to be out at young ages is a somewhat more recent phenomenon. But really, there have been trans people throughout history, and that may help some cis straight people kind of, take a broader, more welcoming view of their trans friends and colleagues and family members when people do come out to them.
And then when it comes to Trans Day of Remembrance, is there a kind of different significance that might come with that? Or do you feel that it is largely about kind of raising awareness about trans identities, like you previously said?
I do think it has a different feel to it. I think Trans Day of Remembrance is a chance to grieve and also a chance to honor people who have been physically hurt and or killed for their trans identities. I think some cis straight people don't realize that lots of trans people have paid with their lives for being out. I'm not 100% certain of the validity of the statistics anymore, but a couple of years ago, there was a statistic floating around that the average lifespan of a trans woman of color was 35 because so many people got murdered. And I think Trans Day of Remembrance is a useful day for people in the community to grieve, but also to gather strength and to try to honor those who are gone and also gain resolve that not happen again.
What are some things that you think people can do to better either educate themselves or better help with bringing awareness to the trans community, especially in a time when they're facing so much transphobic legislation?
That's a great question. Well, I think at least for the moment, it's fairly easy to educate oneself, if one is interested in that. For example, there's a great documentary called Screaming Queens by Susan Stryker, who is a trans woman scholar and founder of Transgender Quarterly, the journal. It's a film she made when she was a graduate student. And it's about the riot at Compton's cafeteria in San Francisco that predates Stonewall by a couple of years. Like actually the first LGBTQ plus riot of resistance wasn't Stonewall. It was this riot at Compton's cafeteria. And it's a great short film that you can find on YouTube for free. Susan Stryker has also written a very accessible book, written at a good level for folks in college, but I think even people in high school could enjoy it as well, called Transgender History, the Roots of Today's Revolution. that traces some historical trans folks and then looks very closely at the 20th and 21st centuries in America and a little bit in other countries as well in terms of trans folks' political awareness and activism.
When it comes to, the LGBTQ plus studies department here at Hofstra, but also just Hofstra academic studies in general, is there anything that you can point to that really shows there is a commitment to bringing awareness of trans issues within the classroom?
I do think there are a number of faculty members at Hofstra who are interested in issues like this. For example, in the School of Communications, faculty member Ashish Kumar just created a documentary that was about trans activism and family love in India. And that documentary was screened at Hofstra in recent weeks. Dr. Anastasio included a guest speaker on, queer tango that was basically looking at trans issues in a class that she was holding on Spanish dance. There have been a number of speakers whose subject matter is trans related or who just happen to be trans coming to campus. We had someone come in from geography who gave a talk who happened to be a trans man who worked in a certain area. We had someone come in and talk to the Honors College about comic studies who happened to be a trans man. I do think there is a commitment by a lot of faculty on Hofstra's campus to try to include and highlight either trans experts in other subject matter or people talking about trans issues. I know sometimes it takes a little looking around. There are a lot of wonderful events at Hofstra. And as one student said to me, yeah, Hofstra has the best events, but they're all at times that I can't make them. So it's a little bit difficult, but I think if people look around, they will see trans related events. But I also think that we can always do more.
Obviously, it's important to sort of represent trans people year round. It's not it's not just 1 week out of a year that we should really focus on trans issues, nor is it any community's issues that should be focused on 1 month or 1 year. What would you say, to people who are interested in trying to educate themselves more year round about trans issues? How would you recommend them going about that?
Looking out for materials. I guess what you don't want to do with any group, right, is just go up to someone and buttonhole them and say, like, so tell me about all your issues, right? Like, that's not very helpful. One of the best things to learn about any and every group is to try and educate yourself. I would say by reading, by keeping an eye out for things like documentaries. In terms of reading, we do have an LGBTQ plus studies free take a book, leave a book library. And we usually do try to have some trans related materials there. So, you could just pick something up and read it and then put it back and then someone else can enjoy it. So that's an easy way to maybe grab something without having to invest a lot of money in it. There are also places online where, it might not be your community, but you might be able to sort of read what the community has to say. If you see what people talk about and the issues that they face, that might give you some insights into what's going on with the community today.
My last question, is there anything further on the topic of Trans Awareness Week or, Trans Day of Remembrance that you really feel is important for our listeners to know?
I guess just don't be afraid of learning something new about people, and don't be, it's not useful or productive to wallow in shame that you don't know something. I think it's better to just take it, to have a good attitude and be like, hey, let me see what I can learn. And I think if you approach the week and the day that way, if you learn something new about the community, that's a win. And I think it will help you be a person who's a better ally and also to just have better cultural competence in general. And for anybody who works with the public, which is going to be most of us in most professions, at any rate, we certainly all work with others, right? Like the chances are you're going to have trans patients, trans clients, trans coworkers and colleagues, trans bosses, trans subordinates, right? You're going to know trans people in your life. And so being at least somewhat aware of what's going on for trans people in America today will make all that go much more smoothly for you.
Well, thank you so much, Professor Jesner, for joining us today on 88.7 FM. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much, Cameron.